Hi folks, welcome to Module 4 in our Focus on Reading series. Unfortunately we've run out of time for face-to-face TPL, so today you're getting me live from the Cultural Room with its fabulous air conditioning. And I'm going to just spend this video running through Module 4. It is Module 4 Teaching, which is only a very quick one, which is nice. I popped it all together, the info, in the resources part of the iTunes U course, so you can access the stuff that I'm speaking about in this on there as well. You'll need your Module 4 teaching notes that look a bit like this. Open them up. There's a teaching routine summary and things like example lessons to explicitly teach, but we'll go through that in a sec. Okay, so just start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land we're meeting today, or that I'm standing on at the moment, the Worimi people, and pay my respect to the elders past and present. Okay, so we're really looking at, there's our standards that are addressed in this workshop, but we're really looking at this idea of classroom talk in this one, and it's really quite daunting, particularly for me. We've spoken about this sort of stuff with classroom talk before, and kind of letting go a bit more and giving some more control to our students in terms of the way they're accessing texts and things like that. So what we're looking at today, again, classroom talk, the comprehension routines that bring together and integrate our comprehension strategy. So we're looking at things that we can do to put together all that Super 6 stuff, but also our teaching strategies and how, I guess, I put in the notes for this thing about how they all mesh. That was a term that I came up with at uni because it seemed to be like we're doing, as teachers, we're doing a lot of different things all at once, and that's really what we were trying to do with this stuff as well, is to kind of mesh everything together and have it, I guess, kind of flow seamlessly, which obviously takes time, but that's really what we're aiming for with this stuff. So we're going to think about things like encouraging deep conversations about our text, which includes modelling how to do that as well, which is really so important. But the focus today will be on this comprehension teaching routine, which I'm going to go through in a minute, and you'll be provided in your teaching notes, that's the notes that you've got in front of you, a lesson format which you can use when you're introducing a new routine. So it says here about looking at, where are we? Sorry. So thinking about some of the changes we've seen in our students, which is, So, and I guess focusing on this qualitative change rather than quantitative. So quantitative is looking at things like PAT test results and NAPLAN results and assessment task results and things like that. Whereas qualitative change is looking at our own experience of student change, I guess. So it's important that we take on board both, because I know that sometimes we have maybe not a lot of great quantitative change when we first start implementing something like this, but we certainly have a lot of qualitative change. Like, I know a lot of my students are starting to use the language, at least, of focus on reading, using our Super 6 strategies, just their names, and saying, well, Miss Hodges, we've forgotten to predict before we do this sort of stuff. So they're picking me up on that, which is really good. And that's an example of qualitative change. So we've got our change process, which is all to do, again, meshing this stuff together, having it work together, professional learning, which we're engaging in now, personalising that professional learning to our classes, and looking at doing it with precision, which is really working with what we're doing in terms of profiling our classes. This stuff is going to be, hopefully we're looking at more precise learning activities aimed at our students, aimed at their ability, but aiming to get that between that, I guess, that zone of proximal development, if I remember that stuff from uni, trying to get the kids from here to here, but remembering that you don't want to make this gap too big, otherwise we have engagement problems and then behaviour problems and all sorts of things. So profiling our students, looking at our texts, making sure that they're accessible but also challenging, is where we're going to have this. And of course our moral purpose, which is to have intrinsic change in all of our teaching and learning practices. The fact that we value literacy and we make that clear to our students. It talks to us about that you asked to introduce more dialogue into your classrooms. I know that I've personally struggled with that, and I still need more time to actually implement that stuff. And probably next year, I'm going to try and start to take some more videos of students engaging in this practice, because I think it is, it's important for kids to see other kids and how they're modelling that practice as well. I think that it's important here, where are we? It says up here, students are encouraged to share their responses, but also justify their thinking. The goal is to learn to interrogate the text, the author, and the issues. And that's really important, I think, because that's that critical thinking stuff that we really we harp on it in English, but it's certainly something I think we should harp on everywhere, because it is very important. Okay, moving on. All right, somewhere I'm up to. All right, I've got here on my little course note here from when I went to the training that the fact that this stuff we're doing in terms of focus on reading, focus on writing, and our content and our teaching strategies are all embedded. It doesn't have to be, I mean, we started off by explicitly teaching our Super 6 strategies, but the goal is to start to move on now and to integrate it within our practice overall and to really mesh it. It says here, sorry, if you want to have a look at things like clarifying terminology, sorry, in Module 1 in teaching, there's a resource on that as well. And it reminds you the difference between comprehension strategies, teaching ideas, teaching strategies, and teaching routines. So just a really quick wrap up, the comprehension strategy is your Super 6. The teaching ideas are what you might do to implement that Super 6. So it might be VIPs, it might be, sorry, they've just slipped through my head, but I know that VIPs is a big one, but there are many, many others. And your teaching strategy as well. So is it going to be you modelling in the entire lesson, or is it going to be group work? Is it going to be whatever? Okay, and we're going to look at this idea of teaching routines today. So it says here, teaching routines allow comprehension strategies to be contextualised into larger teaching routines, such as overall literacy sessions. So if we think about that, that's a primary school idea, the literacy, it's time for literacy groups now, that sort of thing. We could, excuse me, we could think of it this way as we're contextualising this stuff across all our KLAs within the school. So before looking closely at how students' routines can be used, how teaching routines can be used to support students' integrated use of the comprehension strategies, we need to remind ourselves to keep the end in sight. And that is that we want all this stuff to be working together. It's like in that slide I showed before with all the different things in terms of integrating change and how they'll all work together around that moral purpose. This is the same thing. So the comprehension strategies, the teaching ideas, and the teaching strategies are merely ways to support students to achieve that goal of comprehension. So while they're absolutely critical, the end goal is that the kids can now comprehend what they're reading. And the fact that it seems like we're going to be sort of saying all this stuff as a standalone issue, but I mean, if you think about quality teaching, this is what I've got here. I remember them saying this at the training. If you think about quality teaching is inherently embedded within our practice. So we're talking about why are we doing this, which relates to significance. okay? We're always trying to create that quality learning environment. It's just part of our practice as teachers. So this sort of stuff is going to, fingers crossed, become part of our practice as well. But I guess in the beginning it's going to be a little bit of, it's going to kind of stand out more because you're trying to implement this new stuff. So, and that's okay, but just at the end we're going to have it all integrated. It's just part of what we do. We do Super 6, we do this literacy. Yeah, so it emphasises here that the comprehension strategy or the teaching strategy, for the students to master how to use VIPs is great. That's good. But the thing is, their overall goal is comprehension, not just I know how to use VIPs. Although that does help, it's important that we remember as well that if they're great at VIPs, that's good, but they also need to be good at comprehending what they're reading. So in the remainder of the session, we're going to focus on some of these routines and how to explicitly teach them. Okay, now we've got a little quote up here about teaching routines defined. So a teaching routine is an integrated set, so that word again, integrated, meshing, integrated set of practices that students can use with multiple texts in various settings. That one is particularly important. Various settings, every subject. Every teacher is a teacher of literacy, just like every teacher is a teacher of numeracy, okay, even the English teachers. So it's important that we're looking at this various settings and integrated, okay? The fact that this is all going to become part of what we do at Hunter River High, hopefully. Okay. Oh, sorry. Where are we? All right. On your iTunes U materials and resources tab down the bottom, there's going to be some information from guided comprehension in grades 3 to 8, which is the white booklet that every faculty should have in the middle of their faculty somewhere. As is on our table, that's why I said the middle. Excuse me. So, and also revisit, reflect, retell. So I'll pop that information up on the on our course. So if you have a look at reading that sort of stuff, it will give you a richer context as to why you will engage with these routines. Okay. So we're going to be looking at 3 routines. I have used one of them, which is literature circles. Takes a fair bit of planning in terms of a secondary classroom, but is definitely achievable. The other 2 I haven't looked at yet, but that's my goal for next year. So, so literature circles, reciprocal teaching, and questioning the author, although this one does seem to come in a little bit more inherently in English, but certainly it can definitely be used in other subjects as well. Let me move on. So some of you may be familiar with these routines, and that's awesome. So we're going to look at them in detail. Okay. What this asks us to do in your participant workbook, it asks you to have a look at that guided comprehension stuff, and then fill out this little sheet. Now, when I was at training, I did the literature circle, which is why I felt confident in teaching literature circles when I got back from the training. So my summary looks a bit like that. And it talks about, you probably can't read my writing, but it talks about, it's a summary of what the actual, what the strategy is. So it talks about literature circles help students converse with text in meaningful, personal and thoughtful ways, which is stuff that you'll read in that that information that I'll put on there for you. The fact that their interactions with each other drive the discussion rather than me sort of driving the question. Even though I really want to, it's been a challenge for me to step back and say, no, you need to drive this discussion now. But of course, the how it's used is the teacher always models We all know this stuff. We always model what we want our students to do before they do it. So that's important. And I've got here, explain, demonstrate, guide, practice, reflect. So, you know, we explain it, we demonstrate it for the students, we then guide them, that scaffolding, they practice on their own, and then we as teachers or the students, depending on your class, can then reflect on how well that went, how well it didn't go, whatever. Now, the last bit, other relevant information regarding literature circles was I had that we should be using authentic texts, and multiple texts around a theme or a topic work best. So if you're looking at, let me pick a subject, an authentic text. If you go with food tech, I'm just thinking of Joe. Hello, Joe. You could look at using the actual ingredients list or the foods you're going to be using and that sort of thing, and have a discussion around maybe the advertising. What sort of things are they advertising on the front of that package? Are they claiming that this is fat-free, but maybe it isn't actually, okay? Because if you turn it over, you have a look at the calorie intake, and this could work for PE as well in terms of nutrition. If you turn it over, you'll find that it is actually, you know, 400 calories, but it's fat-free, which is a great critical thinking tool. And of course, the assessment of that task, of that literature circle, can be formal or informal depending on your preference. I prefer informal observation, that qualitative sort of thing, but it certainly helps to keep a little written reflection. I've jotted down in my day book when things didn't work or they worked or whatever. So all of these routines, the three that we're looking at today, are detailed in page 23 and 32 from those pages of Guided Comprehension in Grades 3 to 8, the white book, okay? So your idea is read about a strategy, read about a routine and write a summary using that in your participant materials, okay? When you've done that, excuse me, we're having a look at, where are we? Yeah, so you then, sorry, I lost my place. Okay, moving on. This is our next slide. Sorry, there's a little bit of clicking here. Okay. So, think back to the previous module where we considered how you might support your students through model guided independent teaching strategies. We're all really familiar with that stuff, which is good. But if we can just kind of call it to mind, have a think about that. The first thing looks at releasing responsibility. So as we go through our modelled guided independent, we release more responsibility of the learning to the students, which is the goal. I remember someone saying once, I think it was at uni, that the goal is for our students to not need us anymore, and that's when you know that you've taught something well that they can now use on their own, and they don't require you to facilitate that learning anymore, but you're still there to guide if need be. Now, of course, we all know that for some students, we might not progress much past the guided, and I think if we think about those, knowing our students and how they learn from the standards, it's important to recognise that sometimes we can't get this far. We might still be in guided a lot, but at least we're releasing some responsibility. So if we know some of our students, we know that a lot of them won't get to independent. Some definitely will, that's great, but some won't, and that's fine. We can still stay within this guided, but we've released more responsibility, and that's progress, and that's that qualitative progress. And of course, scaffolding and differentiating instruction, which is between planning and teaching. Both of those, it's important to consider your differentiation when you're planning and also when you're teaching. And of course, you'll be scaffolding within all that sort of stuff. And Flexible and fluid grouping, it says it here, it's pivotal to successful student outcomes and employing routines effectively. So again, kind of looking at a primary school example, but in saying that, we can still do group work in our classes, and we can pick the groups, and we can pick our students, and we can have them working in flexible groups. All right, so summary so far, summarising, love it. You have explored a teaching routine, hopefully. I really recommend literature circles. They're a great one to get started. Again, they do need a bit of planning, but please ask me. I'm more than happy to give you a hand with that in any KLA. Prepared, hopefully, having a think about a lesson for explicit instruction of a teaching routine. So I remember when I taught literature circles, I had it with my Year 7 class. You're all sick of my Year 7 class, but that's okay. You'll hear more about them next year. But it took me a little bit of time, probably a couple of days, to just think about how am I going to do this with this class. So, I looked at who I would group together, the size of the groups, the role of each person in the group. So that one takes a bit of planning, and we used a lot of different, because it was a poetry unit, so we used a lot of different poems. Excuse me, and students were able to look, look at those poems and discuss with guided questions, and me showing them how to do it to begin with, to discuss those texts and engage in that deep conversation, which is really important. You've also considered model, guided and independent teaching, as we do pretty much every module, in terms of releasing responsibility, scaffolding, differentiating, and flexible and fluid grouping. All right. So let me just see what we're up to. Implications. Okay. So in your participant workbook, you've got this one here, which I haven't filled out, which I think we ran out of time to do in training. But it does give you a really good overview of how you can start to think about explicitly teaching a routine. So let's just say you're doing literature circles, and you might think about what text am I going to use with this routine. It even gives you teacher prompts, which is really cool. So it says, we've been learning about the things that happen in our brains as we read texts. Sometimes we make images in our brain, visualising. We might, what am I looking at? We might predict what's happening with ask questions of the text, that sort of thing. And then it goes on to how you can move between the students' existing knowledge and then their new knowledge of this new routine you've got. So you might be, today we're going to learn about literature circles, and a literature circle is blah, 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 blah. You model the routine, you then get them to do it with your guided support. They do it on their own if they're able to. Remember, we might not get quite all the way independently, but that is certainly the goal. But again, being realistic, that might not happen just yet. And that's not low expectations, but I think that the expectation we need to have for our students needs to match their ability to be able to do it. I mean, because you don't want to be expecting way up here, and then a student that is just not of that, hasn't reached that ability level yet, is going to feel very discouraged very quickly, as we all know. Okay, so and then reflect on how using the routine helps to understand the text. And that's really important, I think, to just say, look, and now after doing these literature circle, you might understand more about X in this text. Excuse me. Okay, so you can have a look at that one. All right, so it says for us to think about your students and their needs as you complete the notes column of the lesson. Which is this bit here, and that might just be, for example, I might have a student like Luke Forrest, okay, is my Year 8 boy that needs significant adjustments, in his learning. So, for example, I might pop in my notes section that I would place him in a group with some more some students who are able to support him with his learning as well. And I might actually sit with him while he does that literature circle. I haven't done it with Year 8, but that's theoretically. And that's really it, which is really good. It's a nice quick one. Teacher beliefs come after than before. So it says on this slide here, just to end this off, Guskey, which is cited in all that stuff up there, you can see, proposed that changes in teacher beliefs come after rather than before changes in practice. So I think that they come after rather than before. Yeah, so I think that when we see something working, we're more likely to go, yes, that's fantastic. I'm going to change the way I think about instruction in this classroom, because now I'm seeing this kid gets it much quicker than they used to, or this kid gets it. That's great. So it's something we're seeing progress. So I think we're a lot like the kids sometimes. You need to see that what you're doing is making a difference, and then you can say, wow, this actually worked for me. Colleague X, have a look at what I've done, and you can start to share that sort of thing. And we only know if we have a go. I mean, I find it, as I said to you before, I find it really difficult to release control, but I need to start to do that even more so, and which I'm going to look at more next year, because it's really getting our students to try and do this as independently as they can, as they possibly can, because then at least we're seeing them improve in that respect. So just to finish off, what counts as evidence? We've been through this a little bit before, but just to kind of get it in our minds, because we probably will have maybe some stuff that say, well, how do you know focus on reading's working? And then you can say, well, in my class the other day, this student was able to comprehend what they were reading because they used the monitoring strategy. They went back and looked at all the words they didn't know. They looked at, they asked me, or they looked it up, and now they understand more what they were reading, and they were conscious of the fact that they were losing focus. Great, that's success. Which is, but we can also use student data, which is our profiles and things like that. Reading and writing samples, of course, but really picking this, choosing an attainable goal, something that our students can achieve, so they get that sense of, I did it, and really praise them. You know what, you were so good, you couldn't do this before, and now look at you, you're able to write a TEK paragraph. That's great, okay? Or you're able to, just look at my Super 6 posters, you're able to make connections between what you know already, your previous knowledge, and this knowledge in the text. You couldn't do that last week. That's excellent. What support you might need to achieve that goal, plan for it, have a go, have that go in that classroom, okay? Doesn't work, that's fine, evaluate, and then start all over again. I think that's really where we're going to see some change. Okay, last little bit. This is really interesting. As teachers gain mastery over new instructional strategies and saw positive outcomes, this is what I said before, they become increasingly willing to discuss the conceptual foundations for the practices that were working so well. So, Miss Hodges, how did you get your students to all understand that big chunky paragraph? Well, I used a Super 6 strategy. I used monitoring. I used the coding teaching strategy, and I meshed that in with a literature circle as well. Okay, so lots of things going on. So it's not just about one strategy there. We're monitoring, and you may have to teach that once or twice, particularly to our New Year 7 students coming next year. A lot of them are not from Focus on Reading schools, so we will have to have some explicit lessons on how to do those Super 6 strategies. After they have got those, they've got a mastery of it, we can start to move on to those things and hopefully mesh that within our practice a bit more. That's my aim anyway. And lastly, this is just a little reflection, which I think you'll find, yep, in your participant workbook. So if you have a look, it says identify the changes to you and your teaching that you've noticed for each strand of new phase, focus on one. So focus on reading, sorry, phase one, focus on reading. So if you can have a little go at that and just evaluate any changes you've seen in your own practice, in your students' understanding, I'd really appreciate that. And if you can also just tick whether the change was a result of personalisation, precision, or professional learning, or all three, which would even be even better, that would be great too. And it's useful for us all to do. I'm certainly going to have a go. And right at the end is our reflection on the teaching strand of new phase one, focus on reading. And if you can just have a little go at filling out greatest impacts on my teaching for comprehension. Okay, so what has worked well for you? And that's about it. Thank you.